take this off?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. My eyes aren't that good, but I think I'm in the camera. Okay. My name is Boyd Watkins, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Boyd.
Neil, appreciate what you had to say for me. I would say I was lucky when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that I got around some guys. The most valuable thing that they said to me when I first got to AA was stick with the winners. And I didn't know what that looked like. And they said, well, find people that are at a lot of meetings or doing stuff at the meetings and seem to be happy. And so I didn't really, when I was new, I didn't want to be around those people particularly. I wasn't real happy. I didn't want to get involved. Before I get started, my sobriety date is June the 6th of 1996. So I've been sober 24 years and change. That's great that I haven't had a drink in that long, but whether you've had 24 days or 24 years, we all do this thing the same way, one day at a time. There's guys that I see that have 90 days, and I want some of what they got. And honestly, there's guys I know that have 35 years, and I really don't want what they got. It's not just about, for me, just not drinking. One of the old timers that took me under their wing when I was new, he said this, and this was attractive to me. It's because I think that's a big part of what got me and what keeps me here is the principle of attraction rather than promotion. And this one old guy, Clarence Pritchett, he's at the big meeting in the sky. He said this is about a lot more than not drinking. It's about me becoming the man that my Creator intended for me to be. And I really liked that because I knew that was not the man I was when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous by a long shot. And I didn't know how to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And so that's what the people in AA really did for me. If I hadn't have done that work, which are in the 12 steps, I don't think I would have stayed sober. I believe the book, it says that the drinking is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. It was my solution. It just quit working. The problem, I had somebody tell me, tape on the bottom of your bathroom mirror in the morning when I was new. Get a piece of cardboard and write, you're looking at the problem. Tape that at the bottom of your bathroom mirror. And that kind of ticked me off when I was told that because I didn't think I was the problem. There were a lot of other things I thought were the problem, but it wasn't me. But what I've come to believe is, see, that person in the mirror I was looking at, that's who I was always going to for the solution to the problem. And that's where I'd come up with a practical program of action, and that almost killed me. You can't find the problem in the problem. The problem's in the solution. And the solution is what I found in AA. My home groups, I jump around a lot. It's been a while since I've spoke with COVID, so my home group's a Piedmont group in Greensboro. We meet on Tuesday nights. Well, we haven't since this whole thing started, but we do Zoom. But we used to meet on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock and on Friday nights at 8 o'clock. On Tuesday night, we do a beginner's meeting, and on Friday night, we have a moderated step discussion, big book meeting. And they're both really good meetings. It's been my home group the whole time I've been sober. What a home group is to me is it's somewhere that I'm going to be unless I absolutely cannot be there. And it's going to be somewhere that I'm going to be actively involved, participating in that meeting. And that is chairing the meeting, setting the meeting up, taking the meeting down. People need a ride, give them a ride to and from, whatever is needed. And I'll say this, and this is another one that Clarence said, I owe AA everything. I owe it my life, and the harder I try to pay it back, the deeper in debt I get. That is not the way the world worked when I got sober, or when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous. Growing up, I had a relatively normal life. I won't go into that too much. My mom was a housewife. My dad was a salesman. He was an alcoholic. And like when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I really was unclear what an alcoholic was. I knew I was one, but I really was unclear to what that meant. And growing up, I had an example of a non-alcoholic and an alcoholic right in front of me every day. My mom would have 2 drinks every night. She would put about that much alcohol and about that much whatever, and she had 2 drinks, and that's all she ever had. My dad would drink until he went to sleep. It's like when I first got sober, I thought I'd been going to sleep and waking up. Somebody told me, no, you've been passing out and coming to. And I had been. And my dad wasn't a bad drunk. There were bad times in there, but, he was a good man. My parents were both good people. And the thing is, when I first got sober, I blamed a lot of my problems on them, what they had done. And they were not far from perfect, but they were both good, decent people. And they gave all the positive attributes and the foundation that I have today. It took me a long time to get to that point, though. What this program did for me in that respect was it allowed me to separate the disease from my father, because my dad was a good man. And it also helped me to separate the disease from me, because I didn't get that concept at all. I wasn't an overnight success. I came in and I went through the same treatment center that Neil went through, Fellowship Hall in Greensboro. And I didn't really want to go, but I felt like it was the right thing to do to get everybody off my back. And I went for my 28 days there and got my $10,000 big book. Back then it was 10 grand. It's more now. And I got out of there, and I lasted 3.5 weeks. It didn't work because I was unwilling to take step 1. I was unwilling to admit that this is the problem I had with step 1. I didn't even know how to read it right. I read it this way. I admitted I was powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. And I was probably 3 months sober before it got through my head that it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. It's not a me program. It's a we program. And so I didn't really want to go to AA. And so, like I said, I lasted about 3 weeks. I think they wanted me to go to 4 meetings a week, and I would get there right when the meeting started. I would leave right when the meeting ended. You were weirdos. I didn't want to be around you, a bunch of religious nuts. And I would leave. A couple of you'd try to talk to me, and I would And you know how it is. It's like you can tell when someone's willing and someone's not. When I was that, it was so obvious. So, and that's the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. I really thought, oh my God, they're going to make me do a bunch of stuff. They're going to force me into doing stuff, and nobody's ever forced me to do anything here. Everything is all optional, and it's up to me. There's a great deal of freedom in AA to do whatever you want to do. So anyway, 3.5 weeks later, I took a drink and started drinking again, and got to go to Butner. And I don't know if anybody knows what Butner is, but back in 1990, well, that was 95, December of 95, because I went to treatment in October of 95. Butner was where they sent people who didn't have any money. It was the nut house. You got involuntarily committed to that place. And so I got drunk, and my family called the cops on me, and they should have. I was very resentful of that for a while until I'd actually done some step work. And I went down to Butner, and this is how crazy I was. They've got me handcuffed in the back of the sheriff's van, and we're riding down to Butner, and I said to the deputy, "What's your badge number?" "Well, you want to know that?" "I'm going to sue you for false arrest when I get out of here. Don't you know who I am?" That's like a famous alcoholic saying, "Don't you know who I am?" And he laughed. I didn't think it was funny. I do now. So anyway, I went there, got out in a week, managed to talk my way out of it, and got back to Greensboro. And it was like mid-December. I think I actually tried to start getting sober, making some attempt in January. And I would go to meetings. I still kind of wasn't involved. I started talking to some people. And again, like I said, it was those people that were practicing attraction rather than promotion. And I would stay sober for, 30 days, 60 days, and get drunk again. And like I said, that's just January of 96. My sobriety date's June of 96. In March, there was this one guy who he was always at the meetings that I went to, and he always stuck his hand out to me, and he always introduced himself to me again and talked to me. And his name was Ray Alexander. And Ray Alexander, at the time, was a lawyer. And at some point, I'm a golfer. I love to play golf. And at some point, it's about, I don't know, maybe February, he's like, "You play golf?" "Yeah." "You got to play golf with us. We play every Saturday." Okay. I was like, "Oh, God, no. How am I going to play?" I couldn't imagine playing golf sober. And he kept after me, though. And so finally in March, I said yes. And I remember that morning, I got on my knees. "God, please just help me not to embarrass myself." I was so scared. And I show up. And Ray's like, "Boys, get a ride with me. I'm going to 12-step him." So I get in the cart. And the whole round, and I played decent that day, but the whole round I'm waiting for him. He's going to 12-step me. Oh, no. We get on the 17th hole, and I said, "Ray, I thought you said you were going to 12-step me." "Oh, I was just making a joke." And so, but he was nice to me, And so I started playing with those guys every Saturday. And that helped a lot. Because for the first time, I got to see people in AA as just people. And not those other, those AAs. I think, for me, the part of my alcoholism was just that sense of being alone and different and isolated. And I didn't have to be physically alone to feel that way. I remember one time went out with a good buddy of mine before the drinking got real bad. We went out bar hopping and having a good time. And we went to the Eric Clapton concert. He was playing in Greensboro. And we're in the middle of a sold-out Coliseum. Eric Clapton's up on the stage playing, and we're having a great time. And it was like a little moment of clarity because I just stood back and I just had this sense of just being utterly alone. And that's the way the disease feels to me. It is a dis-ease. Anyway, I got to tell you one Ray story. This is my favorite Ray story. And this really is AA. I was probably about 10 months sober, in the Monday night meeting at Fernwood. It was a big book meeting, and we met there. And this guy shows up, and to this day, he's still the worst-looking guy I've ever seen in an AA meeting. He was splotchy. He was shaky. He had two handlers, one on each side. And they brought him in there, and he sat down, and we read the big book, did the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, we get up to do the prayer. And I think we all bowed our heads. I think we got out, "Our Father who art." Crash, bang. The guy had a seizure right there in the meeting. And it freaked me out. Now, the cool thing was there was, I think, 3 doctors there, a couple of nurse practitioners, and I think 3 nurses. So other than a hospital, probably that's one of the best places to have a seizure. And so they all, went and worked on him. And it freaked me out. So I was kind of standing back to the side, and Ray walks by me. And I went, "Man, Ray, I ain't never seen nothing like that." He said, "Oh, that's just an alcoholic seizure. I've had 3 of them. Everybody ought to have one." And I laughed. And that's AA. That's AA. I just thought when I got sober, I wasn't going to have any more fun. It was over. And it was just going to be one long gray day. And I was going to, I don't know. I had so many misconceptions and prejudices about recovery. But you know what? The one thing I did right was they said, "Keep coming back." And I did that. So when I got on my last drunk, and that was Memorial Day weekend of 96, had a plan. I was going to go with the guy I grew up with. We were going to go up to the mountains and play golf, and it was going to be like the old days, because I'm a pretty standard alcoholic as far as the progression of the disease. I'd say probably the first year or 2, got into a little trouble, had a lot of fun. I drank for about 11 years. I would say the middle 5 and 6, it started getting bad. The last 3 or 4 were real bad. The last 3 or 4 I was drinking to black out every night. I was drinking to pass out every night. I drank alone in my apartment because by that time, drinking in public was way too risky a proposition because things happened. And I didn't want to get the call the next day when people would ask me, "Do you remember what you did last night?" because I was a blackout drunk. And that's not good when you're walking around for 3 or 4 hours drunk and not knowing what you've done. There are a lot of people in the world that knew a lot more about my life from day to day than I did. I can tell you that. That's not good. But anyway, so I came back, went on that drunk, had a plan. I was going to drink. We were going to have a good time. Now, this was after going to treatment and going to Butner and literally 3 or 4 years of pretty much, pardon my language, but hell on earth. And there wasn't much fun left in it. And I was pretty much more miserable all the time. The only relief I could find was that maybe 10 or 15 minutes when I first started drinking, I'd get a little relief. And then I'd keep drinking and I'd just get really sad and miserable and just go for oblivion. And that's, to me, the epitome, the essence of the insanity of this disease, that I lived that way for that long. And I was still so suspect of Alcoholics Anonymous and the people in it. And by God, I was right, too. I really thought I was right about a lot of things. But I went on that last drunk, and I think Memorial Day was like the 26th of May. So I was going to drink Thursday, had a plan. And I'd been going to meetings, too. I heard a speaker say this, and at first when I heard it, I thought, that's crazy, but it makes sense to me today. He said, don't drink and go to meetings. It's probably killed more people in AA than anything said in the rooms. And I thought, what is he talking about? And I thought about it, and he's right. Because I did don't drink and go to meeting roughly for 6 months. I mean, I go to a meeting every day. A lot of days I go to 2 meetings or even 3. But I didn't have a home group. I didn't have a sponsor. I was going to learn this thing because I'm so smart. And I don't have to do it the way you guys do it. I'm real smart. I can figure it out. And all I could ever figure out doing that was eventually I'd get miserable enough and drink again. That last drunk made sense to me. It was a great plan, I thought. I was going to drink Thursday. I could drink Friday. We would go to the mountains on Friday. I could drink Saturday. I would taper off Sunday, not drink Monday, and go back to meetings on Tuesday, and nobody would know. Well, June 4th, I'm sitting in my apartment, because that ain't how it went. I'm an alcoholic, and when I start drinking, I pretty much, resign control. All the plans go out the window, and I end up wondering what happened again. It wasn't supposed to be like this. So I'm in my apartment again, and at this point, I'm done. I'm done. I had a Glock 9mm, Glock 17, and I was going to take that and take a 147 grain hydroshock round and take a big mouthful of water and put it under here and pull the trigger, because I saw no way out other than that. Thank God the people in Alcoholics Anonymous have been trying to help me, because enough of that got in. There was just enough hope where instead of doing that, I remember I was sitting in that chair. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and I hope I never forget it. I put the gun down and I hung my head and I surrendered. And I said, God, please help me. And I meant it with all my heart. And I picked the phone up and I called Ray. And Ray didn't have time for me that day, but I said, Ray, I really need to talk to you. He said, meet me at my office at 1 o'clock. And I did. And Ray, at that time, when he died, he was a Superior Court judge. We do a golf tournament every year in his honor to raise money for people that need help in recovery. The man's been dead 20 years, and he's still helping drunks. He's one of my heroes. And if it hadn't been for him, I don't think I'd be standing here. But I met him at his office, and he said, I got to go to Richmond. I got to go argue a case in Richmond. I got to go pack, get in the car. So we rode he had an office in downtown Greensboro, rode to his house. And I don't remember what Ray said, but what happened was I just, like I said, I surrendered. And I told Ray the truth, the gut truth. I told him how I really was feeling, because I hadn't wanted to do that up until that point, because I had too much pride, and I was afraid if I did that, you wouldn't like me. And that's kind of how I've been operating my whole life, and it wasn't working. And so I remember I told Ray just the truth, how I really was feeling from the gut, and I cried. I don't remember when I cried. And he didn't say much. He was just like, why don't you ride with me to Richmond? And it just bowled me over. I thought, this guy who really doesn't know me all that well was willing to do that. And I said, no, I can't do that, Ray. I'm gonna go to Bethel tonight, and I'm gonna pick up a start over chip. And I looked so bad. Ray said, that's a big meeting. Maybe you ought to go to a smaller meeting. And I said, no, Ray, I've been going to Bethel on Thursday night, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to pick up my chip. And I did. And I remember J.T. Bird, God rest that man's soul, gave me that chip. And I went to the noon meeting on Green Street the next day, and I've been going to that quite a bit. And there was a guy there. I was afraid to ask Ray to sponsor me. He was almost like a co-sponsor because I talked to him as much as I did my sponsor, if not more. He helped me a lot. But this one guy there, Larry, he'd offered to be my sponsor at one point, and I'm like, well, I'm not set on one yet. I'm still looking. Which translation, I don't want a sponsor. And so I went up to Larry that day and I said to him, Larry, I can't stop drinking and I'm going to die. I need help. Would you be my sponsor? He said, sure. I said, just tell me what to do. And we're not good at that at all. And I still wasn't done. I mean, I was done drinking, but I still wasn't convinced about AA. I just was so desperate I was willing to try it for the first time. He said, well, all I want you to do is if you get on your knees in the morning and ask God to keep you sober, and at night get on your knees and thank Him if you manage to stay sober that day, and go to one meeting a day and call me. Once, if you can, once a day, but try to go to one meeting a day. And I remember when he said the prayer thing, I said, well, I don't think that'll work. And he looked at me. He didn't get mad. He didn't jump down my throat or anything. He just looked at me and he said, that's okay. Are you willing to try? And for the first time I was. Up until that point, I was not. And so I started getting on my knees in the morning. I believed in God, always had. I had a God of my misunderstanding when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I blamed God for a lot of things that I later found out He had nothing to do with. The God of my misunderstanding was kind of like a cross between Santa Claus and Monty Hall. I'd either ask Him for stuff or I'd play Let's Make a Deal. If you get me out of this, I'll do this. And that, in my experience, is not the way God works. I just started asking Him for help and thanking Him. And I heard an old timer, I don't know who, but they said the best prayers are the simplest ones. And thank you and help are prayers. And prayer changed for me too. At some point a guy I rented an office space from, his wife died, and I said, she's in my prayers, you're in my prayers. And he looked at me and he said, her life was a prayer. And I thought, that's really cool. So it's prayers. It is me asking God for help and thanking Him, but it's about being the man that He intended for me to be and taking the actions that guy would take. And that's so important in this program, in my experience, is the actions. And it says it in the book 4 or 5 times. It says it's a spiritual idea and a practical program of action. I had not been willing to take the practical program of action when I first got here, which was get a sponsor, join a home group, talk to the sponsor, and work the steps. That was another thing that confused me. They kept talking about the program, and what's that? I thought it was going to meetings, and that's not the program. It's one of the best kept secrets in the fellowship. It is right here tonight. Here are the steps which are suggested as a program of recovery. I cannot work the steps on my own. I need a sponsor to do that. I don't know. It would be like, and I don't know anything about computers. It would be like me trying to reboot and fix a computer when there's some guy that works for Dell sitting right beside me offering to help. And I can sit there and pound away on that thing for a year, and he could fix it in 5 minutes. some of my other experiences when I was new. Because I hope I give somebody some hope here. If you're new, the main thing is recovery and sobriety is way better. It's not like the end of the party. I've had way more fun and done way more things sober than I ever did drunk. Well, I was probably about maybe 6 months sober. And back then I worked in a job where I was in sales, and I always had appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock. Well, the noon meeting I really liked. It was my sponsor's home group, and it met on Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. But because I had appointments on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1, I could only make it on Monday and Friday. And I wished I could have made it all 4 days, because Larry was always there, and I always liked to see him and talk to him. And I've been trying to figure that out probably for a month, and I went and told Larry just basically what I told you. And he looked at me and he said, well, who makes your appointments? And I said, I do. He said, well, why don't you just make them at 1:30? And I went, oh, okay. And he solved my problem. And that's recovery. That's kind of like an analogy for recovery right there. I can try to figure something out forever. I can go tell somebody else, and it's amazing how I can get some outside input, because all my problems are right here and I can't see them. Somebody with a little perspective seems to be able to see them better than I. A little objectivity. Anyway. So, worked with Larry for about a year, and we walked through the steps, and he helped me a lot. I'd say one of the best things we did was Thanksgiving Day, we took a meeting out to a treatment center. And that I was still kind of full of self-pity. I was probably about 6 months sober, 5 or 6 months sober, and I was still pretty much full of self-pity, and that helped me a lot. And then one of my sisters, we were still on speaking terms. She invited me out for Thanksgiving, and we had a nice time. But this is like recovery. When I got there for Thanksgiving, I go to hug her, and she sniffed me. And that ticked me off. I've been sober. Don't you know? But she sniffed me. And I was still really uncomfortable, just in general. I was working on my 4th step then, because I did my 5th step right before Christmas. So I was still pretty uncomfortable, but I wasn't drinking, and it was a nice time. It was okay. And I left, and I think they were happy I was there. I was, because I hadn't been at Thanksgiving. I had missed a lot of stuff like that due to my drinking. I'll circle back. I got one story Neil and I were talking about. So anyway, that was the first Thanksgiving sober. I got a new sponsor at about 13 months, and he took me through the steps again. And this guy was an old-timer. My first sponsor was great, but basically he just wasn't into the 12 steps as much as I needed to be. And this guy was. And he took me through the steps again. And I really did a lot more work with him in the book and taking the actions that the book suggests I take. Now, what happened was when I got to the 8th step, and I made this list of the people who I had harmed, we went through that. And my sister was at the top of the list. How do I make amends to her? Because I had been a bad brother for a long time. When I was young, we were very close. She taught me to read when I was very young. It's still one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever given me, and I love my sister. But my disease and my behavior separated us for probably about, I would say, 13 or 14 years. I believe this. I believe I had alcoholism from day one. I don't think when I started drinking I became alcoholic. I think I triggered the disease actively at that point because my thinking was different. And like I said, I jump around a lot. I'll tell you a little bit of a story. When I was probably about 8 years old, I read the paper in the morning, and I always read Ann Landers, and I had been doing this since I was probably 6 or 7. I read Ann Landers and Dear Abby. Those were interesting because there were normally some kind of interesting story in there. Well, there was a column in there, and it was about a guy who went out and got drunk and in a blackout hit somebody, and he came out to his car in the morning, and a child was embedded in the grill of his car. Now, that stuck with me, and I remembered that. And that's, I believe, alcoholism. That's alcoholic thinking. And it's like, when I would go out and drink, I would normally go over to the same buddy of mine. He lived not too far from me, and I'd go drink over there, but I'd drive home in a blackout. And in the morning, I'd have to come out and find my car because I wouldn't remember where I parked it. And where I lived in these apartments that had an upper and a lower parking lot, and if you got there late, you had to park in the lower normally. So I'd walk out to find my car, and of course I'd walk around like I wasn't looking for my car because everybody's watching me because I'm so self-absorbed. Center of the world, center of the universe. But when I finally found my car, if at all possible, I always wanted to come at it from the back so I could kind of look at both sides to see if there were any dents. And the last thing I would do, I would circle around and look at the front of the car to see if there was anything there. And the thing is that kind of seemed normal to me. That didn't happen overnight. It developed over a period of time. My disease was very progressive. And the best analogy I can give for that is if you take a frog and you throw him in a pan of hot water, boiling water, he'll jump right out. But you can put a frog in a pan of cool water and turn the heat up real slow. And the frog will just sit in the water and boil to death and not know it's dying. And that was the way my drinking was. So, sorry, I digress. So that first Thanksgiving was very uncomfortable, and she sniffed me. And I went to my sponsor, and I said to him, "She sniffed me." And he's like, "Well, why'd she do that? Is that something she did or you did that made her do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right. Pray for her." He always used to say that, but I did. Between the first and the second Thanksgiving, I did a lot of work. And like I said, when I got to the amends part, how do I make amends to her? He said, call her once a week. Ask her how she's doing and shut up. I didn't like that. But, and if she asks you how you're doing, tell her, but don't talk a bunch. All right. And make sure you tell her you love her. And so, okay. And that's how I made amends. That's how I started to make amends to my sister. I called her up, and back in those days when I would call her, it was like, yeah, what do you want? That was kind of her attitude, because when I called, that's normally what it was up until that point. I didn't call her unless I needed something. But I told her, I said, you know, I'm I don't know, 6 months sober or whatever. I said, and 9 months sober. But I said, I owe you an amend. I know I haven't been a good brother. I'm going to try to be a good brother to you. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just call you once a week and just see how you're doing. Because I haven't been there for you, and I want to be there for you. And she, of course, yeah, fine. But she didn't believe that because she'd heard lots of talk from me over the years. She hadn't seen a lot of action. And I think my recovery, I'm trying to do the opposite of that, talk less and act more. And so I'd do that. For the first couple of months when I'd call her, she was like, yeah. And after a couple of months, hey. A little while longer, hey. And we got to know each other again. And there was a couple of times she needed me. They had horses, and it was cold. I don't know when it was, but it was cold. And she had a mare. Calls me about 10 o'clock. I'm nice and warm in the house. She said, the mare's going to foal, and is there any chance you come out here and help us? Albert's shoulders are messed up. That was her husband. He had messed his shoulders up, and he couldn't do anything. And I said, sure, I'll be right there. Now, internally, I'm going, no, I don't want to do that. But I did. And so I'm riding out there, and I'm praying. And I get out there, and she says, we need to have the stall shoveled out so the mare can foal. And she hands me a shovel. So I'm out in the freezing cold. I'm shoveling horse manure out of a stall, and I'm gritting my teeth going, what the does this have to do with not drinking? They're using me. And I'm resentful, and I'm keeping my mouth shut, and I did that. And I'm just thinking, this is stupid. And so I finish doing it, and I walk up to the house, and she comes out, and she puts her arms around me and hugs me and starts crying and says, I don't know what we'd have done without you. I wasn't mad anymore. And I got in my car, and I went home, and I thanked God the whole way, because I'm not capable of doing stuff like that by myself. But I came here, and you folks introduced me to a power that's a lot greater than myself, that if I would choose to take some simple actions and be willing to be teachable, that is so important. And just be willing to try, that things could get better. And they've gotten way better than I expected. Alcoholics Anonymous is so much more than me not just taking a drink today, although that's important, and it always will be. But if that was all that was here, I would have left a long time ago. The people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was lucky, like I said, they said stick with the winners. And some people got mad at me about that. What, are you saying they're losers? No. I'm not saying that at all. There were people that were willing to help me, and I needed to stick with them. And they got me helping other people. I probably had right at 10 months the first time somebody asked me to sponsor them. And I think the first 6 guys didn't make it. They got drunk. And I thought I was doing something wrong. And I was talking to my sponsor, and he said, all you can do is try to help them. It doesn't say you can get them sober. But it's 100% effective. You didn't take a drink, have you? And I said, no, sir. And that's really the deal. But it was just, I got hanging around with those guys playing golf. And we still play golf. We went and played Tuesday, because the forecast said it was going to be 67. Well, it was 37. Well, I'm gotten better with the drinking, but I'm still crazy about golf. We played and had a good time. And I think about, like, back when I was drinking, I'd go play and I'd be in a blackout on the back nine. And I would drive home with one eye closed sometimes. And, and I thought that was fun. And today I look at that and go, my God, thank God I didn't kill anybody. The way I drove and the way I lived. Haven't been as active as far as face-to-face meetings because we haven't had them for, almost a year now. I've been to some Zoom meetings. Honestly, they're just not my cup of tea. But I meet with guys face-to-face. I sponsor 6 guys now, and we stay in touch. And I play golf with guys in the program. Got a new guy now, just picked up 2 years, a little bit ago, and he is just on fire with this thing and doing great. And I mean, I've sponsored a lot of men over the years, and without exception, they've helped me a lot more than I have helped them. Absolutely. Because they have done the one thing for me I needed more than anything when I got here. Freedom from the bondage of self. That was always my problem. That's why I drank. The book's real clear about that, I believe. And that's, I think, what the steps did. It's like when I was a kid, I was a happy kid and everything was great. And probably about 6 or 7, the world didn't start being so great. And I started kind of accumulating the stuff that people accumulate, resentments, fears, shame, because I'm not doing the right thing all the time. I just knew I wasn't, I think most of us know right and wrong. And then I started drinking, and when I was about 15, that was the first time I drank, and I drank as much as I could, but it's like those type of actions from that type of lifestyle, I just piled more and more and more garbage on me, on the real me. And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, working this program, I started being able to remove the garbage. And it's not like I have changed. I'm still the same guy I've always been. But all that garbage that I had piled on myself and on my spirit, I've been able to remove a lot of it. Most of it. I'm never going to work this thing perfectly. But I do believe that it is a design for living that works. That has been my experience. It is a lot better plan for my life than I had before I got here. And the people in Alcoholics Anonymous, the ones that I'm close with, it's the best group of people I've ever been associated with in my life. It's like when I first got here, nobody ever asked me, what kind of car do you drive? What do you do? Nobody cared about that stuff. They asked me, how are you doing? Do you need some help? Would you like to get involved? I think it was Norman Vincent Peale, it might have been the Dalai Lama, but one of them two people said that Alcoholics Anonymous was the greatest spiritual movement of the 20th century. And I would agree with that. It has definitely been the greatest spiritual movement in my life. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it off now because they told me you'll never have to be alone in AA unless you speak past, 8 o'clock here. If you're new, it's like that they told me, just give it a try. If you put half the effort you put into this that you were putting into drinking and drugging, you're a guaranteed lock for success. And I remember Clarence looked at me one day and he said, try it. What do you got to lose? And at that point, that made sense to me. So I'm grateful to be here. Grateful for AA. Thanks.